not any special one. There was an old girl that I was seeing quite often over there that her father was in the Air Force. And
It started just after sunrise. Sirens echoed down Elvis Presley Boulevard as agents in black SUVs blocked off every entrance to Graceland. Tour buses screeched to a halt. Visitors who had gathered for the morning tour were told to leave immediately. Moments later, the iconic white gates of Graceland, adorned with Elvis's own silhouette, were sealed shut by federal order. Reporters rushed to the scene, cameras shaking as the unthinkable headline broke across every news channel. The FBI has confiscated Graceland. Witnesses described seeing agents in gloves and masks carrying sealed boxes from the mansion. Some boxes were labeled evidence, others marked with radiation symbols. One insider claimed a warning had been issued days earlier, suggesting the estate contained classified materials of unknown origin. But how could that be? Graceland had always been a place of pilgrimage, not a crime scene. Yet on this morning, something far greater than music history was unfolding, something the authorities clearly didn't want the world to see. And as agents swarmed the property, questions began to swirl. What could possibly be hidden inside Elvis Presley's legendary home that required the full force of the federal government? Before dawn, long before the media arrived, neighbors had already noticed the movement. Unmarked vehicles quietly positioning themselves along the street, headlights off, doors opening in unison. What began as a whisper in the Memphis morning quickly turned into a full-scale federal operation. Residents described seeing nearly 24 agents in tactical gear fanning out across the property. They weren't there for protection. They were there for retrieval. By 5:30 a.m., the first command van had parked directly in front of the gates, and the words Federal Bureau of Investigation flashed in bold letters across the monitors inside. Within minutes, Graceland was locked down. No staff were allowed in or out. Even the Presley family, who had long overseen the estate's preservation, were reportedly notified only after the fact. According to documents later leaked from the Memphis Police Dispatch log, the FBI had obtained a sealed federal warrant under National Heritage Protection, a clause typically reserved for operations involving stolen government property or dangerous materials of historical value. But what could possibly connect Elvis Presley's mansion to something like that? As the search intensified, agents began to section off rooms with yellow tape. The living room, the music hall, even the jungle room, all became part of what officials called Zone A. The operation was eerily quiet, methodical, and heavily recorded. Drones were deployed to scan the property's perimeter, and forensic trucks lined the road for nearly half a mile. Rumors began spreading fast. Some claimed the government had been tipped off about a set of missing documents tied to a Cold War operation that Elvis had allegedly stumbled upon during his USO tours. Others whispered it was about money, hidden funds, offshore accounts, or tax records buried within the estate. But eyewitnesses who caught glimpses through the iron gates noticed something that didn't fit any of those theories. The agents weren't just taking papers. They were carrying strange, lead-lined containers, the kind used for radiation or biohazard evidence. Local news stations scrambled for answers, but every attempt to question the agents was met with the same line: no comment. By sunrise, the once peaceful grounds of Graceland looked more like a classified government site than a music landmark. Residents standing along the road said the agents treated every step like a matter of national security. When one reporter shouted, "Is this connected to Elvis's death?" an officer quickly ordered her to step back. That's when it hit everyone watching. This wasn't just an investigation. It was an intervention. Something inside Graceland had triggered a federal response. And as the convoy of evidence vans began rolling out, one thing became clear. Whatever they found behind those walls wasn't just valuable. It was dangerous. By the time the second wave of agents arrived, the operation had shifted focus. The upstairs rooms were cleared, and attention turned to a place few had ever seen, the restricted basement. Even lifelong employees of Graceland admitted they'd never been allowed past the heavy oak door at the bottom of the stairs. It was said to be used for storage, but those who'd passed by swore they could hear faint humming sounds, like old electrical equipment running behind the walls. For years, fans had speculated that this was where Elvis kept his private archives, tapes, letters, even unrecorded songs. But when the FBI's lead investigator ordered it opened, the atmosphere changed. Two agents in hazmat suits descended first, followed by a locksmith carrying a steel case. The door didn't budge. It wasn't just locked, it was reinforced from the inside, sealed with layers of rusted bolts and a faded warning plate that read simply, "Authorized access only." After nearly 2 hours, the locksmith finally cracked it open, and what waited behind sent chills through the team. The basement was lined wall to wall with steel shelves, each stacked with boxes marked EP Confidential. Dust coated everything like snow. But one thing stood out immediately: a large, rusting film projector in the center of the room, still plugged into an outlet. Nearby, dozens of 16mm film canisters sat labeled with handwritten notes. Vegas 73, private sessions, DC meeting, the Colonel. When agents began unsealing the boxes, they uncovered more than memorabilia. Inside were hundreds of documents, receipts, and photographs, all categorized meticulously in folders written in Elvis's own hand. It wasn't the belongings of a collector. It was the evidence trail of someone documenting something or someone. The most alarming discovery came from a sealed trunk hidden behind a false wall. A technician found it by accident after noticing irregular brickwork. When they pried it open, the trunk revealed multiple microfilm reels, audio tapes, and folders stamped Top Secret. One of the labels bore a date, March 24th, 1977, less than 5 months before Elvis's death. The contents were immediately classified, but a single sheet left on the floor hinted at what they'd found. It referenced Operation Blue Meadow, a name tied to declassified intelligence programs from the late 1960s, programs involving surveillance of American celebrities suspected of political influence. Elvis's name had never appeared in those files before, until now. Witnesses claim that as the boxes were lifted out, one agent muttered under his breath, "This goes way beyond entertainment." Whatever Elvis had been collecting in his final years, it clearly involved information powerful enough to draw federal interest decades later. And though the FBI refused to confirm what the documents contained, one thing was certain: Graceland's basement wasn't a storage room. It was a vault, and Elvis Presley had been keeping secrets the government thought were long buried. As the agents cataloged the items found in the basement, one particular discovery froze the room. It was a single yellowed envelope sealed with brittle tape and marked in Elvis's unmistakable handwriting for Vernon only. The name referred to his father, Vernon Presley, who had managed much of Elvis's personal business before and after his death. The document was tucked inside a tin lockbox beneath a pile of unmarked tapes, almost as if it had been deliberately hidden from anyone who might stumble across it. When the FBI's evidence technician slit it open, a faint scent of aged paper and cigarette smoke escaped. Inside was a folded letter, several black and white photographs, and a small reel of audio tape. The letter, dated July 1977, just weeks before Elvis's death, appeared to be written in a tone of fear. He wrote about being watched, followed, and pressured to keep quiet about what he saw in Vegas. He mentioned a night at the Hilton Hotel, where, according to him, the wrong people revealed things that could ruin lives from Hollywood to Washington. He warned his father to destroy the letter if anything happened to him and to never let it reach the Colonel. Analysts later confirmed the handwriting and ink to be authentic. The contents of the photographs have never been publicly described, but insiders said they showed Elvis in a meeting room with men whose identities were blacked out in later copies. One figure, however, remained visible. A man wearing a government security badge dated 1976. Even more chilling was the reel of audio tape. When restored, the voice that played was unmistakably Elvis's, but the message was fragmented, almost frantic. "They know I took it. Tell Dad. The film. Don't let them have it. The tape cut off abruptly after a thud and muffled footsteps. Federal sources later confirmed that the letter's description of events matched fragments of a real but sealed case from the 1970s involving missing intelligence materials connected to organized crime. Elvis's note directly referenced a man from D.C. with a badge and no name. For years, fans had speculated that Elvis had ties to law enforcement. He famously carried honorary badges from multiple agencies. But this was different. It suggested that Elvis may have been involved, willingly or not, in something far deeper. By the time the Vernon envelope reached Washington for analysis, Graceland's basement had been cleared, sealed, and restricted indefinitely. The FBI refused to comment on the letter, citing matters of historical sensitivity. But whispers inside the Bureau said one thing plainly. Whatever Elvis had discovered in 1977 had haunted him until his death, and that envelope was his final attempt to make sure the truth didn't die with him. As investigators scoured every inch of Graceland, one team made a discovery no one expected. Behind the famous jungle room, Elvis's lush, green-carpeted sanctuary filled with exotic furniture and carved wood, a maintenance worker noticed an odd draft coming from the wall. The blueprint of the mansion showed no vent or doorway in that section, yet the temperature difference was undeniable. Acting on instinct, one agent tapped on the wall and heard a hollow echo. Within minutes, they brought in infrared scanners and confirmed the unimaginable, a hidden space, completely sealed off from the rest of the home. With a careful push, the wall panel gave way to reveal a narrow staircase, steep and dusty, winding upward into darkness. No one on the preservation staff had ever seen it before, not even those who had worked there since the 1980s. The agents climbed carefully, flashlights cutting through the cobwebs, until they reached a small wooden door. When they opened it, the air was thick and stale. Yet, what they saw inside left everyone speechless. The room was soundproof, its walls lined with acoustic foam. In the center sat a small reel-to-reel recorder, an old microphone, and a desk stacked with hundreds of labeled tapes. Written in neat script on each one were titles like Session A, Meeting 3, Private Talk, and Visitors, Confidential. Dozens of empty soda bottles, crumpled napkins, and half-burned candles covered the floor, as if someone had spent long, sleepless nights here, documenting every word. Technicians began playing the first tape, and the voice that filled the room was unmistakably Elvis's. Calm at first, then tense. He was talking to someone whose voice had been intentionally distorted. "You said it was taken care of," Elvis said. "They said you handled it." Then silence. The other voice responded faintly, "You weren't supposed to keep a copy." The next tape was even more disturbing. Elvis was recorded late at night, speaking to himself. "They don't want this out. If they find this room, they'll erase it all. But I can't stop." His tone was tired, almost broken, and his final words before the tape ended were, "If anyone ever hears this, know I tried." The FBI confiscated every tape immediately, sealing them in evidence crates. But one agent reportedly whispered that a few recordings were so sensitive they'd never see daylight again. The room above the jungle had clearly been a secret studio, a confessional chamber where Elvis had recorded his private conversations, fears, and maybe even evidence. The question was, what was he so desperate to record? And who were the people on those tapes? As the FBI's forensic audio unit prepared to decode the rest, even veteran agents admitted that this case had gone far beyond anything they'd expected. Graceland wasn't just a home, it was a hidden archive of the king's final, unspoken truths. By the time the story broke nationwide, Graceland was no longer a tourist landmark, it was a federal site under strict investigation. Helicopters circled overhead, and news vans lined the streets as journalists tried to piece together what had triggered such a massive operation. At noon, a spokesperson from the FBI stepped to the podium in front of a wall of microphones. The crowd went silent as she unfolded a paper and began to read. This morning, under federal warrant, the Federal Bureau of Investigation conducted a lawful seizure of materials located within the Graceland property in Memphis, Tennessee, she said. her tone rehearsed and steady. These materials are being examined due to their potential connection to matters of national interest. No further questions, no clarifications, just silence and the hum of confusion. The world wanted answers, but none came. Within hours, theories exploded online. Some claimed Elvis had secretly worked with the government during the Cold War, using his celebrity to gather intelligence at high-profile events. Others believed the basement files linked him to organized crime families he'd unknowingly crossed paths with in Las Vegas. The wildest claims suggested the tapes from the secret room contained conversations with political figures, possibly even U.S. officials, discussing scandals that were later buried. But the strangest part was how quickly unrelated agencies got involved. The Department of Energy and Homeland Security both requested access to certain sealed evidence boxes. That raised immediate suspicion that the case was about more than old paperwork or film reels. Insiders hinted at something more alarming: radiation tests conducted on objects recovered from the basement. The words "potential contamination" appeared briefly in a leaked internal memo before being redacted in later versions. News outlets were warned not to speculate, but the mystery only deepened. Local authorities were silenced, and private contractors hired by the Presley estate were told to cease all restoration work indefinitely. A longtime Graceland curator told reporters off record that the agents seemed especially fixated on items found in a room behind Elvis's old office. They took everything, he said: files, photos, even some of the wall panels. They acted like they were searching for something hidden inside the structure itself. Meanwhile, the Presley family remained publicly quiet. A short statement from the estate read only, "We are cooperating fully and trust that Graceland will be restored to its rightful state once the government's review is complete." But behind closed doors, panic was growing. By that evening, the phrase "matters of national interest" had turned Graceland from a museum into a mystery. And for those who had spent years studying Elvis's life, one haunting realization took shape. Maybe the king wasn't just a victim of fame. Maybe, just maybe, he had stumbled upon something the world was never meant to see. As days turned into weeks, whispers from inside the investigation began leaking to the press. Several agents, disturbed by what they had uncovered, spoke under condition of anonymity. They claimed that among the thousands of documents, tapes, and films seized, the most chilling items were the photographs. Hundreds of them. Some were stored neatly in labeled envelopes, others tossed haphazardly into drawers, as if hidden in a rush. When developed and examined under forensic light, they revealed an unsettling side of Elvis Presley that no one had ever seen, or was ever meant to. Many of the photographs showed Elvis at late-night gatherings surrounded by unfamiliar men in suits. These weren't his usual entourage, and none of them appeared in any of his public records or personal circles. Several were later identified through facial recognition as individuals connected to Cold War intelligence and organized crime investigations. But it was the context that made the images so terrifying. In one photo, Elvis appeared visibly shaken, his eyes red as if he'd been crying, while two men stood behind him whispering into his ear. Another image showed him sitting at a table in what looked like a hotel conference room, with stacks of documents and what appeared to be briefcases filled with cash. The caption scrawled on the back in Elvis's handwriting read simply, "Not my deal." Investigators were particularly alarmed by a sequence of photos dated August 14, 1977, 2 days before his death. They showed Elvis at the back entrance of Graceland, dressed in a dark jacket, carrying a silver briefcase, and speaking with a man whose face was obscured. FBI image analysts later identified that man as a missing federal informant who vanished in 1977, days after Elvis's death was announced. The final photo in that series, however, was the most haunting of all. It captured Elvis standing alone in the same spot later that night, the briefcase still at his feet, but his expression was hollow, almost vacant. The timestamp on the photo placed it less than 12 hours before he was found unresponsive upstairs. Some agents claimed the briefcase in those photos matched one of the sealed evidence boxes later taken from Graceland's basement. When questioned, the FBI refused to confirm or deny that connection. Other photographs depicted strange symbols on Graceland's interior walls, marked faintly in chalk or carved behind picture frames. Cryptic notes like, "Do not show them," and "The tapes must stay hidden," appeared on napkins and scraps of stationery found nearby. It was as if Elvis had been documenting his own paranoia, or warning someone about it. A forensic psychologist who reviewed the material told reporters this wasn't delusion, it was preparation. Those words ignited a firestorm of speculation. Was Elvis's final weekend one of fear and desperation? Was he trying to protect evidence, something bigger than music or fame? As the images circulated through federal hands, one conclusion began forming quietly among the agents themselves. Elvis Presley hadn't just been living under pressure from stardom. He had been living under surveillance, and the people watching him might have been the same ones who came for his home decades later. In the weeks following the raid, the world's attention turned from shock to disbelief. News outlets demanded transparency, but the FBI remained silent. The Presley family's attorneys filed multiple Freedom of Information requests, each one denied under the same phrase, ongoing national security review. Insiders who had worked the case began vanishing from the conversation, reassigned to unrelated departments or placed on extended leave. But rumors persisted that something had gone wrong, something that shook even veteran federal agents. According to a whistleblower within the transport unit, several crates of evidence disappeared in transit between Memphis and Washington. The manifest listed 43 sealed containers, but only 36 were officially logged into the Federal Archive. When questioned, officials claimed it was a clerical error. Yet, security footage from the Memphis loading dock showed 3 unmarked vans arriving hours after the FBI convoy had left. No license plates, no record of departure. Those missing boxes were never seen again. Local residents swore they saw strange activity around Graceland in the nights that followed. Black SUVs parked behind the mansion, figures in unmarked uniforms entering through side doors after midnight, flashlights flickering in the upper windows. By morning, the vehicles were gone, and new locks had been placed on the gates. Tour operations were officially suspended, until further notice, and employees were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements. Even the estate's cleaning staff were interrogated by federal officers. They treated that place like Area 51. One worker said quietly to a local reporter, "We weren't allowed near the walls," like they thought something was hidden inside them. Then, the most bizarre twist came from a construction crew hired to assess the foundation damage caused during the raid. When they examined the lower level, they found portions of the basement floor resealed with a newer concrete compound, one not used during the original 1950s construction. Beneath it, faint traces of radiation were detected. The discovery sent shockwaves through the contractors, who were quickly escorted out and ordered to destroy their notes. No explanation was given. Not long after, Homeland Security quietly classified Graceland as a protected historic site under federal observation, effectively closing it off to the public indefinitely. Within weeks, several online users claimed to have obtained leaked photos showing government scientists wearing hazmat suits in the mansion's lower rooms. One image, blurry but haunting, showed a metallic cylinder being lifted from a hidden cavity beneath the jungle room. The symbol printed on it, an eagle within a triangle, matched insignia from Cold War-era research divisions. Officials dismissed the leaks as fabrications, yet those who'd worked on the original FBI raid privately insisted they were real. There were things in that house that didn't belong to Elvis, one agent reportedly confessed. Things no civilian should have ever had. What those items were remains a mystery, but their sudden disappearance suggested one unsettling truth. The government wasn't just collecting evidence. They were burying it. Whatever was found inside Graceland wasn't meant for the public to see. Not in 1977, and not now. Months have passed since the raid, and Graceland remains sealed behind federal barricades. Tourists still gather at the gates, pressing their faces against the iron bars, hoping for a glimpse of what's left. But all they see are padlocks, warning signs, and silence. For the first time in history, The home that once symbolized Elvis Presley's warmth and generosity now stands cold and untouchable, a property under the control of the United States government. The Presley family's repeated appeals have been ignored. Court filings vanish mysteriously, motions are delayed, and witnesses scheduled to testify are suddenly unreachable. The official statement remains unchanged. Graceland is part of an active investigation involving sensitive historical materials. But what materials could be so dangerous that even the king's family can't enter his home? Whispers inside Washington say the confiscated items have been moved to a secure underground facility, one reserved for objects classified as cultural artifacts with potential intelligence significance. That label alone raises questions too big to ignore. Could Elvis Presley, America's most beloved entertainer, have stumbled upon secrets the government wanted erased? And if so, what did he record? What did he write? And who was he protecting? Some former FBI personnel, now retired, claim that certain tapes recovered from Graceland never made it into official storage. One anonymous source said there were tapes labeled Washington and Project M. After the transfer, they were gone, and so were 2 agents. He paused before adding, those tapes could rewrite history. Meanwhile, independent investigators have begun their own pursuit, tracking clues from the few photos and documents leaked before the blackout. A researcher from Tennessee State University claims one photo retrieved from the estate shows a letterhead belonging to a long-defunct intelligence division once tied to mind control and psychological operations during the 1970s. Another image appears to show Elvis standing beside a piece of equipment resembling a small containment chamber. It wasn't part of any known recording device, and its presence in Graceland defies explanation. Could this have been the source of the radiation traces reported by contractors? No one knows, and no one in authority will confirm or deny it. Yet among all the chaos, one haunting theory continues to circulate among those who've studied Elvis's final days. The idea that Elvis knew something so powerful, so terrifying, that he spent his last months trying to protect it. His insomnia, paranoia, and fear of being watched suddenly makes sense under that light. Maybe he wasn't just struggling with fame. Maybe he was struggling to keep the truth hidden. Fans who still visit Graceland now leave notes along the gate, messages not of adoration, but of warning. They took what he tried to tell us. One reads, "Find the tapes," says another. Others simply write, "The king knew." Historians debate whether the confiscation was justified, but the unanswered questions loom larger with each passing day. If Elvis was truly keeping government secrets inside his home, then his legacy isn't just musical, it's political, and perhaps even prophetic. Because the more the FBI hides, the more the world begins to suspect that the king of rock and roll wasn't just a legend of stage and song. He might have been a witness, one silenced by history itself. And now, with Graceland locked and the truth buried beneath decades of secrecy, the legend of Elvis Presley has entered a new era, one not of fame or tragedy, but of conspiracy and forbidden truth. Whatever the FBI found inside that mansion, it wasn't just memorabilia. It was evidence that the story of Elvis Presley, and perhaps America itself, was never what it seemed.